Good morning or night, whichever the case may be. This is Sharon Alexander for Arts with Alexander, and had a little snafu this week. I had recorded the video for the week already and went to upload it, and somewhere between the phone and the computer and making some more space on this phone so we could keep doing this, somehow that video disappeared. It got deleted somehow. So I spent an entire hour on the mermaid's tail, which you won't get to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little demo on what I was doing. I was working on the bladder kelp behind the tail. So today what I'm going to do, just to do this little extra side piece, I'm going to use this Art and Fly paper. And this is 100% cotton paper from Art and Fly. I'm not sponsored, that's just what I'm using. This is a two-sided glue-bound paper in a 9x12, 140 pound. It's not my absolute favorite. It has nothing to do with the paper itself. It actually has to do with the glue being on only two sides. This isn't a true block because it is open on both sides here. There's no glue holding it down. So unfortunately, because of this, the paper tends to bubble up in the middle and get held down the sides, and your paint runs off the sides if you're using a really wet technique. Fortunately, this is illustrative style, so that's not really a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my watercolor pencils. This is from the Arteza set. This is number A100. It's pear. Basically, it's kind of a light avocado. And I'm going to do just 3 strands of this kelp. And we're going to start off with the first one, and I'm just going to take it and starting with a stem because it has just a really thin stem, and I'm just going to put this slightly wavy line across the page, and then I'm going to carefully go next to that line so that we've got 2 parallel lines. This will be our stem for the kelp. Just going right down here. And I hope we have time for all this, because what I mostly did that no one got to see was finish the shading for the background, the water background, and I applied a metallic highlight to the stems and leaves of the kelp. And that was not actually finished in that hour, but I had gone ahead and finished that particular embellishment off camera, so that you wouldn't be spending another hour just watching me do that. I mean, how boring would that be, just applying one technique? So we've got our first strand here, and I said I was going to do 3 strands, but we're going to do 1 strand of drawing and painting at a time. Partially because it's less confusing, and partially because we may not have time to do the whole thing otherwise. So what I'm going to do is, if you look at the kelp the way it is designed, it goes around in a spiral up the stem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this side, the kelp, and kind of a flag coming off of it, because it's got a little narrow stem that comes off there, and then it has a little flag. And this one's going to be in front. So I'm going to go up a little ways, and I'm going to make another one of these little bulbs going behind the first one, coming out, and another little flag. We're going to pretend we're drawing there because we don't want to actually draw there. And the next one's going to be behind, so we don't want to draw on top of the things that are in front. So again, we're going to pretend that we've drawn that line, and I'm going to say that the current is washing this way. Our stem's going that way, but it's caught up in other things we can't see. So we're going to make another little flag shape coming up behind this one and coming up to a point. And then we've got one on the other side. And this one might get caught up in the current so that it goes in front of that stem. So we are going to do that. Put that in front of the stem and there. And we're just going to keep on going around in the spiral, adding these little bulbs that are filled with air. These plants actually produce and store air in these little round bulbous bits, and it helps hold the stem up in the water. Pretty interesting, huh? And then of course we have these long fronds whose purpose is to hold chlorophyll and collect sunlight where it can. It's pretty dark towards the bottom, so towards the bottom of a kelp forest there oftentimes is just a lot of stem, depending on how much water's down there. I'm going to have this one go behind the stem just to be different. This one's a little skinnier than I'd like, and this is one of the nice things about watercolor pencils. I can do that and not erase and not worry about it, because when I get it wet, the extra lines will disappear. And I can just draw with this watercolor pencil straight onto the paper and not worry about lines I'm going to be erasing or those terrible, terrible mistakes we don't want people seeing and thinking, oh, less than professional. Oh, I can't believe they made that mistake. I can't believe they put that line there. I can't believe they did that angle. Can't believe there's a small blue piece on my paper. I don't know whether it was there to start with or not. And I'm not going to care because I'm probably going to cover it with paint. So anyway, we've got this way, that way. So we need to have one over here. This one just seems like it would naturally go on top just because of where it's placed and where it's going. A little fuller right there. And the next one goes on top. Okay, so here we have a strand of bull kelp, and there will be 3 others going that way and possibly this way, caught up in there. But we're just going to set the pencil up here for now. And I've got these hand-mixed paints that I am going to use up eventually. Let's spray a little water in here. Now this is the lightest one. I think I want to use the lightest green I've got there, but more water. Set my little water spray bottle aside. And let's go with the number 4. This is the number 4 squirrel. I'm squirrely and I like squirrel brushes. So there we go. We got our squirrel brush. We've got it wet so that it'll absorb water nicely, because water absorbs to water. You have a dry brush, you stick it in wet paint, and it's going to say, I don't want that. It's going to reject your paint. It's going to be a little bit more work. Get your paint wet. Get your paint wet. Get your brush wet. And it'll soak it up like a sponge. And it'll hold it. Not unlike a sponge until you start smearing it around your page. It's nice, huh? The other nice thing is my little palette here for handmade paints like this, or even just tube paints. This is kind of nice, these little hexagonal gizmos. This is actually the packaging from my quail eggs that I got for breakfast who knows how long ago. And they keep them in these little hexagonal shapes, which are perfect for holding paint, and they've got these nice little walls that you can get your brush into and wipe it off. Okay, I'm going to start at the bottom, put this back in the camera because I keep moving it. This one's on top, so I can go right over that line and make that line disappear. Who wants to see a magic trick? Let's watch our lines disappear. That's pretty magical, huh? Yes, Miss Bun. Magic is exciting. Or at least magic tricks are exciting. Real magic's actually kind of creepy. I know that there's a lot of popular stuff out there about magic right now, but I'm not real sure I like the idea of making deals with unknown beings and unknown powers to get powers of your own. Who's to say they're not going to pull a switch on you and you're not going to get your deal? Tricks are just really ingenuitive people doing what looks like impossible things, and it's all just an illusion, a trick. So I don't mind illusionists. Not real fond of magicians. If you're a magician, sorry, don't expect me at your show. Since this is all one color, I can actually go right up next to the first color that I'm doing without too much worry about bleed or anything like that, which will make this a whole lot faster. And because this one's behind, we're going to make this a bit darker so that we get the shading from the things in front of it. Then it goes on top here, so it's going to be a little lighter at the top than it will be at the bottom. Right about now I'm thinking that while this is a small space, I might like a slightly bigger brush. So we'll finish this leaf. A little bit more of the color here at the bottom, just kind of drop it in there so that we can see that that is towards the bottom of that leaf. Don't worry, it'll fade up so it won't be too terribly noticeable. Blend it up just slightly. There, I'm going to rinse it off because I've decided I want a bigger brush. Dry it, shape it, put it back in its little holster. And let's get to number 6. Still swirl hair. These were about $20 from Amazon, so not terribly expensive brushes. I've actually been quite pleased with this. I have no idea how to pronounce this. Danaway? I don't know. I'm not sure how you'd pronounce a W next to a Y like that. But the first part definitely looks like Dane. Probably from China. I didn't look. I just needed a brush. Because while I had plenty of brushes for acrylic, you know, they just weren't really cutting it the way I wanted it. And my short-time instructor that I did have, one of my mother-in-law's friends who is a professional landscape watercolorist, insisted that watercolor brushes need to be made out of natural materials. Old school, you know? I don't mind old school. I think that some of the ones from Princeton and Red Dot and some of the other synthetics they've come up with are pretty stinking good. I have no problem with using them. This just happens to be what I could afford and what I had at the time. And I don't see any need to buy anything else until these wear out. There we go. And I'm just kind of going around that stem. You've probably noticed that. I'm going to save that little thin stem for last. Mostly just because I want to make sure these leaves are right. Because if something happens, I can always go back and modify the width or even which direction my stem is going. Get a little bit more water here. Didn't get as much prep time today as I would like, so it's kind of warm in here and everything's drying really, really fast. Can't run the AC, the extra AC, I should say. This room actually has its own AC separate from the house because it was an addition. But because of that, the AC is right next to this table. And it's, you know, it's industrial, it's kind of noisy. So I don't want to run that while we're trying to record. And it could have definitely used a bit more time to run back here. It's toasty. And it makes all of the paint dry really fast, which is both to my advantage and against it. Fortunately, what I'm doing is not a big juicy watercolor of a sky or an ocean. So not as big a deal if it dries a little fast. It just means I have to use a little water and work a little more quickly. Okay, that one's going over. So we can go ahead and get that on there. Everyone talks about coral reefs and the problems with the oceans desalinizing, that's losing salt and getting warmer. It's not just a problem for them. The kelp forests are also having a lot of issues with waters warming up, becoming less salty, trawl fishing. Oh yeah, there's a lot of damage, and the habitat's already critically in need of protection and regrowth. There are a lot of really cool things that live there. There are crabs and little seahorses that don't live anywhere else. And when those kelp forests die and they're gone, those little critters die too. All gone. No more. Hope everybody got enough video because that's the only way you'll see them again. It's important that we take care of our planet. And while, yes, our planet does a remarkable job of repairing itself, for us to just blatantly go through and rip out habitats because we need firewood, not worrying about the creatures that live there, it's really selfish. It really is. I mean, it's not that we couldn't use other things. Maybe other things are a little harder to get, a little more expensive. Maybe they're just easier to get for one reason or another. When these things are gone, they're gone. No more little kelp crabs or sea dragons, which live in kelp forests. And if you don't know what a sea dragon is, I highly recommend Googling one. I actually have a drawing of one that I did in ink. Fascinating little creatures. Very complicated to draw out and paint. My last attempt at that had coffee spilled all over it, so that was a loss. Probably should try that again sometime. Because they are cute. It's like a little piece of seaweed came to life and became a little sea dragon. Really cute. But when the forests are gone, the kelp forests, that's it. That's it, folks. Porky Pig time. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's all, folks. I hope that's not a copyright infringement. I guess I'll find out later. It's a lot. It's really old at this point, so probably not a problem to do one little line. Other thing about kelp forests, people probably don't know this, but we actually get more of our Earth's oxygen from seaweed than we actually do from the rainforest. And while we get a lot of oxygen from the rainforest, we actually get more from seaweed. It's a crazy thing to think about, isn't it? But I was talking about Earth repairing itself in amazing ways. We know how long it takes generally for various rubbers and plastics to break down. And it takes millions of years for radioactive materials from our places like Chernobyl and places like that to go. But did you know that they have recently, in the last few decades, discovered bacterium that eat rubber? They have found out that the reason we don't have roads that are just coated in layers of rubber is because there's a bacteria attracted to our asphalt roads that eats rubber. How cool is that? I got one more for you on that too. We know how long it takes for radioactive materials to break down. We know that nothing, short of cockroaches maybe, survives radiation. And yet at the same time, they have recently discovered that in Chernobyl, in the reactor room, is a kind of fungus that is apparently growing on the radiation. That is really crazy, isn't it? Where did that come from? Has that been around the whole time, or did that just show up because the Earth needed it? An interesting thing to think about, isn't it? I'm going to move these paints to the other side. They're starting to get in the way of my arm, and I don't really want to smear paint everywhere. And I need the angle so that I can not cover up what I'm working on here. And oh yeah, this number 6 definitely helping. Your brush size makes a difference. A big difference. Oh, sounds like somebody is intruding. A certain small boy who didn't do his chores had to stay home and couldn't go to Grammy's today. He's been told to be quiet. We'll see how long he manages that. Told him I'd let him know when I was done. He may be sneaking back there just to listen to me do this, though. Who knows? They always think they're quiet, but they're never as quiet as they think they are. I always hear them. I'm going to bet you can, too. If you can't, well, good for you. Not quite enough paint to get to the end, so let's put a little water up there and drag that paint up there. These are getting towards the top, so they're going to have a little bit more light, and they could be a little lighter. There we go. Ah, sounds like he may have gone outside. Wise decision. Probably went to get his helmet. We have a nice little paved driveway, so he can go out there and ride his bike. So he probably went to get his helmet. He's always good about that. He's not so good about wearing his arm pads, knee pads, that kind of thing, but he's pretty good about getting that helmet. He's already knocked his noggin on the door frames. He doesn't need to go bashing it on concrete either. That was a funny story. Took him when he was younger, before all this pandemic stuff started, and we couldn't go anywhere. And I learned to cut his hair myself. But before that, really nice barber in town that I would take him to, and he'd been going there since he was 18 months old. So he knew this guy really well. But he is ADHD. He's still a little young for them to officially diagnose it, but we're 99.99% sure that he is. He can't sit still for anything most of the time. But we were waiting for his turn in the chair, and he was in a room with lots of open space that he wasn't used to having, and he wanted to run around. So what's he do? He trips, slides into a doorway, and this building's probably 100 years old. One little finishing nail sticking out of the door frame, and his little noggin managed to find it. Scared the barber to death. Thought we were going to have to take him to the emergency room, and he was worried we were going to sue him. Nah. Known the guy my entire life, too. I had no interest in doing so. He just needed a Band-Aid. Band-Aid and a little cuddle, and he was good. Okay, now I'm going to go back and get that stem, which can be a little bit more intense because it's pretty much under everything. Yes, Rabbit. Sometimes she's almost as bad as a little girl hiding behind your skirt. Any little thing startles her and she's got to come run to Mama. Hide under the desk. Probably not used to having... Go away, gnat. Got some sort of gnat who's attracted to my potted plants back here, and sometimes they intrude as well. Okay. A little darker on that stem. Just going to drop the paint in there, let it do its own thing. Okay. A little bit darker. I'll go back and blot that slightly in a minute. As you can see, there's nothing really wrong with this paper. The paper itself is great as long as you don't try to get it too wet, because it's only glued down on one side. It's not on a stretched out board. It's not properly taped down or even glued like a block normally should be. A little different with this two-sided stuff. But as long as we don't get this too wet, it should be just fine. Illustrative styles like this are usually just fine for this kind of paper. As for what it's made out of, it's just good old 100% cotton paper, so it's going to do exactly what cotton paper does. Soak up your work like a sponge, and it does make quite the difference. I don't know if you can tell right now since I don't have the other one sitting here for comparison and it's too big to sit on this table, but it really, really makes a difference in presentation for the paint. Because a lot of times pulp paper I find looks a little smeary, even with good paint. I find that the cotton paper makes everything just a little smoother. Of course, part of the reason I'm using this paper is it wasn't terribly expensive paper, so I can do it quick and dirty for this and not worry about spending expensive paper. Okay, so we've got leaves on here. This is the first strand. It's still kind of wet, and I don't want to put the metallics on here while it's still slightly damp. So I'm going to set the brush aside for a little bit, get me a little drink of my drink. Okay, and now we're going to get that pencil back and do that next line. Now the idea is that this is a bunch of kelp, and there's probably a clump of them down here in the corner somewhere. And so this one's going to come up, and for the sake of having more space, we're going to do another one of those wavy lines, and we're going to go behind this line that we've got. Just very carefully making another line back here. It's coming up in there, and up and out. Okay. Let's see, which way do I want that? I think I want this to go on that side, so we're going to make it a little bit thicker on this side. Put that parallel line down. And it's coming down here. Means I'm going to have a little tiny spot right there. I'm going to have to work hard to color in without making a mess, but that's okay. It's okay. And bringing down that line down here. Nice little sweeping curve as this thing swirls around in currents and possibly fishtails, since the original picture is, of course, with that mermaid tail going through. And we started off with one in front. So I'm just going to use the curling thing I talked about earlier, and I'm going to start it off on the side. I'm going to have it down here and send that little flag. I'm going to put that one in front. Get that little flag back there. Now this is disappearing back in here, but there is a little piece that would be right there, so we'll have to do blue there and a little bit right there. All right, continuing the swirl into the back. Make a flag. Neck is kind of going with the curve of this, so you're not going to see that, but we see when it separates. It comes out there. Meets up out there. That's on the back, so we're going to want this side. Again with the flagging. Now when you start building up multiple layers like this, it can be pretty confusing to draw it all at once. That's why we're doing this a little bit at a time, one strand at a time, so that we can see exactly where each strand would really be going. Because otherwise we'd get confused, and when we came back and tried to do this, especially since we probably wouldn't be able to do a large scale painting like the tail in one sitting, yeah, it can be pretty confusing doing it that way. One strand at a time, one day at a time, one strand at a time, one piece of seaweed at a time, one bite of your food at a time. Let's say you're eating fish. Try eating the whole fish in one gulp. That just sounds like a good way to get choked. And not as fat as I'd like. I think I'll put a little more fat on that side. There we go. The next one would be on top, but it's behind this. So we're going to pretend draw with my pencil, not actually touching the paper. Coming up here, and this is where it will be a little more confusing. So we've got that coming through here, and flagging out. I'm going to go ahead and make it cover that line so that it is a little less confusing. And the next one would be underneath. No, this one's on top, so it would be on the side. Our line is coming through here. The last one was there, so we're going to pretend paint again and make that flag. There we go. Let's see. Back, side, front, back. So on the back, we're going to have our little round piece, but it's coming behind that, going over that, and making that flag. It's probably going to come more out there and disappearing here. And there's really not going to be much of that one seen at all, except for that round bulbous bit. That was behind, so now we're beside again. Another pretend drawing of the bulb right here. How convenient, I've already got a little round piece here we can use for the bulb. And flagging. Flagging. There we go. That one was behind, so we're back to the side. Another little bit of pretend drawing and flagging. Flagging, flagging. There we go. That was beside. Now we need one on top. Right about here, I think. We've got a lot going on here, so there's going to be a lot of things just kind of lost in the background. You know, let's run some fingers over this top part, and yeah, I think we can do this now. Okay, now I've noted, and it's not just this brand, but I've got some Primatech metallic paints here that I used before. And for this, I used this antique gold color. So I'm going to spray a little of this on there. It takes a little bit of work to wake these metallics up. And it's, like I said, it's not just this brand. I've heard people mention this about several different brands of the really good watercolors that are metallic, that they take a little bit of waking up. So set that water on there, let it sit a little bit. And then we'll have to scrub our brush across it a little bit. Now for this, I am going to use a different brush. I'm going to switch up. Excuse me. Switch over to the Winsor & Newton. This is a professional watercolor sable pointed round 3. I know it doesn't look very pointed, but don't worry. We'll get it wet. And you'll notice that all those little hairs just came together. And I'm going to scrub it across this a bit so that these are all activated. And now I'm going to switch these two palettes because I'm going to set this green to the side since I'm not using it right now. I'm going to bring this over here so I don't get metallic paints smeared all over my table or my arm or anything else. And this time I'm going to start at the top, because what I'm going to do is drag that metallic paint across that stem. Look how that pops. Probably doesn't look real metallic on there, and I'm outlining the plant as well, outlining that. And I have just a little bit of a design to that. We'll see it better on the next leaf. A little more paint. Maybe a little less paint than that. Okay, and we're going to get that stem. And now I'm going to outline that stem, hopefully, with paint, which needs more water apparently. Gonna make up for the fact that it's so dry back here and so warm. But When it was going to be this warm, I'd have turned this on before the kids were done with school so that it would be cool in here. But we'll live. Okay, now I'm doing this little design. I'm just taking it across the side of that little bulb and bringing it up like the center of the plant would be. And here we've got a long stretch of gold. Now that makes me wonder, how is metallic watercolor paint made? I'm pretty sure this isn't real gold. It would have been much more expensive. I know there is gold paint out there because I actually have some that my grandmother had with her costume jewelry for touch-ups in case she needed to touch up her costume jewelry. I still have the paint. It doesn't appear to be dried out or in any way useless at this time. Who knows, maybe I'll use it for something interesting at some point, other than fixing my jewelry. Or fixing her old jewelry, I guess. Because gold and I don't get along very well. Not in jewelry, at least. Okay, outlining. But now I'm kind of curious as to what really is in these. And later maybe I'll look and see if I can find out how this paint is made. What's in this paint? I'm pretty sure mica's probably a part of it. Good old shiny mica, which is a mineral that has a very nice reflective quality. It's used in a lot of both paints and cosmetics, as well as regular arts and crafts. I think it's also the shiny element of some of the soaps. I'll tell you though, it is not a good thing to grow things in. I once bought some topsoil to fill in a spot in my garden, and I was going to put in good dirt on top. It's a good thing I put good dirt on top because that stuff was terrible. It flattened out. It held plenty of water, but it wouldn't let it go, so the plants were always thirsty. It had no nutritional value for the plants themselves, so they basically starved to death unless I just fed them fertilizer constantly. Useful for arts and crafts, not so useful in your garden. Not useful at all, in fact. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what actually is in these metallic paints. Because I'm just kind of curious suddenly. I'm not going to run off in the middle of a video, of course, and go look it up. But if I think about it, I'll tell people what I found out next time. Because what do? I sit here and paint and tell you trivia, right? Or just whatever's coming out of my head at the time I'm painting. Who knows? Maybe some people find that useful. I'm sure it's got to be at least as useful as neurographic art, which is basically random painting with rules. I'm not very good at it. I keep wanting to make it into something instead of just letting it flow. Last time I did that, and then I kept adding to it. I added the neurographic part of it, all the little squiggly lines, and rounded out all the corners and filled in all the colors in there. And then I went in and started adding flowers to it. Every place I felt looked like a center node, I added petals to it and turned it into a giant flower painting. Interesting in its own way. I'm not really sure it counted as a neurographic art. Although I think the point of neurographic art is that it's supposed to be relaxing, and I guess I was relaxed. As relaxed as a book reader who's reading a book that they find that they don't like as much as they thought they liked the characters in them, and so they're screaming at the book, "No! Don't do that, you idiot!" Oh, they just did it. So I'm looking at my painting going, I probably shouldn't do this. That's not what's supposed to be in neurographic art. I just did it. This is supposed to be neurographic art, not some sort of surreal flower painting. No, that's too bad. That's what I turned it into. It's still pretty interesting looking. It's just not following the rules. But I suppose when it comes to art, I don't follow rules. Probably because I don't know what they are. Of course, at this point, I've done enough painting that depending on the rule, I might just disagree with the rule. I mean, there are some rules that make sense, like in composition. Yeah, I've gone and looked at people's pictures and paintings and seen the ones that ignored, say, the horizon. One of the painting rules, or composition rules, I guess is really it, is that you should have no lines in the center of your page. Your horizon shouldn't be in the center of your page. Well, that's kind of odd, you think? Well, why is that? But if you go and look at paintings that are really, really cool, you either see a lot of whatever's on the land or a lot of whatever's in the sky. And when you have one that's just got kind of a line in the middle of it, you kind of look at it, you're like, well, what am I supposed to be looking at? The sky, the land, the sea, what am I supposed to be looking at? It's kind of like the rules of three. If you have even numbers, it never jives right. But if you have odd numbers, I happen to like numbers that have roots in 3, just a personal preference. But odd numbers just look more aesthetically pleasing than even numbers. One of those weird little psychological things, they just do. And so these are the rules that people add for art and photography that I actually will always try to follow. It's not saying that depending on what I'm doing, I might not follow it. I might say I don't feel like doing that this time. I've got a different idea. It may not work either, or it might. Sometimes the magic just works. One of my favorite authors is quoted saying that. And if you know who that author is, kudos to you, fellow nerd. Because that particular book definitely came under the heading of sci-fi. Although certain parts of it may be dystopian futuristic, so, well, yeah, I guess that still counts as sci-fi. Some of it might just count as fantasy because it is so out of this world. Haha. Although if you take that particular series and follow all of it, and then find out that there was another series written even before that series that the author decided in later years to connect, and you find out that it was actually the past of this particular series, and you're reading basically a future Earth, a very different future Earth, thousands of years in the future Earth. Really well written. I know that I actually had read the first series alongside the current series, or future series, if you want to put it that way. And I had no idea they were connected. So when he wrote the connecting book, it was suddenly like, wow. Made me want to go and take both series, which the future series has more than 20 books, I think. I've kind of lost track. Been kind of busy for books lately, at least for books with 1,000 pages in them. Kids' books, on the other hand, I've read quite a few. Mommy, read this book for me, Mommy. Trying to get back into it. I've got a few new books on my to-be-read pile. Every reader does. Might even start buying some of the to-buy books that I've wanted to collect for a while. Some of them are books that I've technically already read and just want to reread. Some of them are books that are related to books I've already read, and I'd like to read them. Find out where the story went. Hopefully they don't do what one series I was reading did, and frankly, I got tired of the book series. You had a bad guy doing terrible things, and for whatever reason, the hero was not addressing the bad guy. Following other prophecies, doing other things. I don't know if he ever finished the series because I got so tired of him not addressing the bad guy that I quit reading the series. Pretty sure there were a couple more books afterwards. I don't know if the series ever finished or if he just got tired of writing it. Maybe he couldn't figure out how to beat his own bad guy. I don't know. That would be sad. You'd write a series with a bad guy and then just not know how to finish the series. Okay, so that is what I did. I had, set that over there, out of my way. This is what I did. I took all that seaweed that was behind the tail, and all of it now has this gold gilding on the stem and this little pattern on the leaves. And it's too big to just fit on this table, or I would bring it over here and show you, so you'll have to see that on the next video. As for right now, we've got a little bit of time left, so I'll continue and show you, oops, sorry bun, I didn't mean to put my foot on your foot. Just show you painting the painting behind it. Layered paintings, whoops, that's the 4, I don't want the 4, 6. Okay, 6 it is. Maybe a slight metallic quality to my water now, but it's probably not going to make much difference. And now this is in the background, so we're going to want to make this background just slightly darker than whatever's in the front. Because it's in the back, it's got more in front of it, it's got more stuff blocking the shadows. And yes, I'm starting at the bottom again. I'm trying really hard not to go over that metallic, because that metallic shows through and doesn't. You can still see the shadow of metallic paint when you paint over it, but the shine's gone. We don't want that. So I'm going to work really, really hard to get into these little tiny pieces that I've got back here with the tip of my brush. And not go over that metallic paint I've put down. Now, admittedly, on the other painting, I did not do this. I didn't go and make one strand and then do the metallic. I did all the strands and then I went back with the metallic. But this is for demonstration purposes to show you what I lost in that hour. And just like that hour, I'm not going to finish this hour either. There's no way I will finish this little side project in an hour. Though I will probably work on it some more. And when I do finish it, I will either pick it up during another video and just show it to you. Or if you want to see it before that, I will probably finish this sometime the week. And it will be posted on my Instagram and my Facebook, which are both listed down below. Sadly, of course, because it will be a picture, you won't be hearing this lovely, what do they call this, surfing music by the vlog musician company, which is also listed down below and available through YouTube to listen to in the background. They do these nice little 1 hour music copy-free bits that I can use in the background so that I can have less than silence behind me. I don't like silence very much. I get tired of yammering, but I really like music. Pretty much a constant thing in my life, music. Helps me concentrate. Keeps me from going completely insane from silence. Not sure at what point in my life I decided I didn't like silence, but I've always had music in my life. Just always. Go with those little bits again. Put a bit of flag off to the side on here, which we'll be carefully outlining in gold later. Okay, so far so good. I'm probably making mistakes, but they're not major ones. And some of them will be corrected when I go back with the metallics, where I will probably make new mistakes. We are not perfect people. There are no perfect people on the planet at this time that I'm aware. Anyone who thinks you are, go get some help. You're delusional. So we are all going to make mistakes. But then here's where the fun part of mistakes come in. Mistakes can be fun. Mistakes can be beautiful. Some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, people say, yeah, it wasn't quite the way I intended it to look, but when I was done, I kind of liked it, so I left it. You would be amazed how many movies, TV shows, where somebody would mess up their lines. That was not in the script. And they rolled with it because they decided that was awesome. That was funny. It was spot on. It was perfect for what they really wanted, but they didn't write it that way. And boy, they wish they had, because that was just awesome. Let's take the Robin Hood movie that Kevin Costner was in. The actor Rick Allen portrayed the bad guy of Nottingham, the Sheriff of Nottingham. I found out this week that the Sheriff of Nottingham's lines were written by Rick Allen. He got a hold of the script, didn't like it, and rewrote all of his own lines. And I guess the directors were good with it because they kept it. Of course, it's also entirely possible that he said, you're going to keep my lines the way I rewrote them, or I'm not going to be part of this film. And even then, he was a big name in acting, so they probably said, you know what, we really want to keep you in here, so we're going to keep your lines just the way you rewrote them. And boy, aren't we glad they did. Any of us who have actually seen that movie and enjoyed it, his acting in that movie, at least as far as I'm concerned, probably some of the best stuff in there. I mean, Morgan Freeman's portrayal of the Muslim guy that was his companion in that movie, oh yeah, totally awesome as well. And personally, despite complainers, I really didn't see any problem with Kevin Costner's work in it either. There's probably stuff I don't know about it that makes it less desirable to other people, but sometimes ignorance is bliss. Just like mistakes can be great. Although calling Rick Allen, or Alan Rickman's rewrite of the script for his sheriff character a mistake, no, that would be a mistake. Some of his lines were some of the best. Why a spoon, cousin? I wonder if that was, well, I guess if he rewrote all of his lines, I guess he would have had to. I wonder if he rewrote that guy's lines. That'd be funny. Speaking of mistakes, I should have left that little bulb alone. So that's what happens when you start thinking about other things. Just take some of that color off, because when I go back with the metallic, that'll fix that problem anyway. And get some of that green on here. It's going to need to be a little greener than that. And that bulb should be just a little fatter. Okay, that'll do big. And flag up there. It looks a bit darker on this. Now let's just darken up the other part since that part's in shadow. And it looks the same shade of green as what's on top of it, which we don't want because this is in the background. There's more shadow back there. There we go. And it even blends in down here. Very good. That'll do. This looks a little choppy. Let's smooth that out. There. Okay, now we've got another piece of flag behind that little bulb. And that's where confusion comes in, but it's part of a piece we can't see. At this point, there are several pieces we can't see. And we want it to be shadowed. So we can just drag this up here and let it get lighter towards the top. There we go. Wouldn't mind having a little bit darker down here in this corner behind this leaf. Just drag it up. There we go. Okay. So we've got our line coming through here, and there's a bulb here and probably a flag going through there. So, need a little green here. A little green there. And then we need a little darker green in the background. But yeah, it's warm enough in here that this is drying almost as fast as I put it down. Both helpful and not. Let's see. It comes there, so this one's coming here. And my paint is dried in my palette enough, it's become a little too thick. I'm gonna have to rewater that. Smooth that leaf out. It's trying to curl and crimp on me. There we go. Water in here. There we go. That should help. Okay. Now we've got another piece behind here. It's actually coming together quite well, considering that this was a off-the-cuff replacement for deleted video to demonstrate what everyone's missing. And I'll be honest, it was quite a bit, because even after I ran out of another hour, I couldn't stop. I wanted to keep painting. And I went ahead and finished metallicizing, if that's a word, of the entire background, at least of the seaweed. Which means the next time you see that, all of the silvering will be, all this gilding on there will be done. And I must say, it makes a huge difference. I could say that up until I did that, the painting was getting a lot of that ugly stage to it. Every single watercolor has a point where it has kind of an ugly stage. Point where you're like, I don't know, maybe this wasn't such a great idea. And then you hit that one point where everything changes. And I'll tell you, my idea to turn around and put the metallicized paint on this was that point for this picture. It just made a huge difference. And you will see that next week. We're almost out of time, but I think I've got just enough time to finish this stem, hopefully. Because I am basically just waiting for that vlog music to end, since they perfectly time it for me already, and all I have to do is listen for it to stop. Convenient, right? Certainly makes it a lot easier for me to tell without having a timer on, interrupting everything. Don't want that. And I must say, my son has been wonderful. He must be outside somewhere, hopefully not getting in trouble. I'll have to worry about him getting in trouble with people, since there are no people out here to get in trouble with. But I'm sure he could do something with chalk, or maybe tear up the shrubs. I don't know. He's a boy. I'm sure he could find something to tear up. Although that's usually the domain of his sister. Sometimes we call her Docto Destructo, and there is a good reason for it. Because she is a little Doctor Destructo. You would look at that little girl with that cute little smile, and you would never guess the destruction she can wreak. Hopefully someday she'll grow out of it and be creative instead of destructive. And that was our hour. So I hope you enjoyed my little filler video. If you did, please like, subscribe, hit that bell, share with your friends, all that great stuff. And I will be back with the tail next time, and we'll continue with that painting. Don't worry, I'll show you how this one ends at some point on my Facegram. Facegram? Is that a thing? Facebook and Instagram. You can look those up later. And I hope everyone has a great day. Bye.